Hollywood keeps trying to make strong female characters, but only ever ends up making strong, characterless females. Now, in making a video like this, you might suppose I'm a male chauvinist dinosaur who's casually misogynistic around women all the time. Well, shows how much you know because I don't ever interact with or talk to any women, so the joke's on you. Actually, I do talk to some women. The lady who fills out the prescription for my diazepam to help wean me off the OxyContin, and in the last year I've been visited by a census taker and a Jehovah's Witness, and one of those two was also a woman. One of the biggest failed ideas in the last couple of years is the on-screen girl boss, sometimes known as the strong female character. It's true that women were marginalized for decades in Hollywood, and that superhero fantasy has been appreciated by audiences made up mostly of dudes. In recent years, Hollywood seemed to think that once women had patiently abided, they would at last be able to take the narrative reins, to allow unfettered female perspectives, voices, and storytelling, helmed by female writers and directors. And at last, blockbuster superhero entertainment would achieve a long-sought parity. The traditional male audience would obligingly adapt to the new gender dynamics, opening their minds, hearts, and wallets, and mainstream ladies, maybe a little tentative about superheroes and fantasy, would keenly try something typically out of their element, and end up having a terrific time being entertained by strong female characters.
He was in the Amazon with my mom when she was researching spiders right before she died.
Black girl magic!
Do you know why a ship floats and a stone cannot?
Messaging sucks. Any messaging in entertainment sucks. There's a great quote from the Russian director Andrei Tarkovsky. Never try to convey your idea to the audience. It is a thankless and senseless task. Show them life, and they'll find within themselves the means to assess and appreciate it. Modern writers have got this ass backwards. They aren't especially interested in showing their audience life, and are way more interested in trying to convey their idea to the audience. And the biggest culprit is Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen, I hate every decision, action, and sequence of cause and effect that led up to you being born. I resent your father for not having the discipline to pull his small and veiny penis out of your mother's stinking vagina, and instead fatefully spraying his watery semen into that soggy dump from which you were expelled 9 months later. And I detest the Colombian farmers, truck drivers, and baristas along the entirety of the supply and production chain that culminated with you first handing a cup of coffee to Steven Spielberg. You're the reason I have to take so many pills, 'cause you ruined my beloved space films. In order to get through making this video, I decided to try and speed up the effects of the antidepressant medication by sliding down my drawers and inserting the pills as suppositories. But all that happened was that it agitated my bowels, and the antidepressant chemicals in the medication splattered out with the fecal matter, leading to a diarrhea of sadness. There are no ideas. Fantasy and escapist popcorn movies aren't really meant to be jam-packed with profound ideas. Not everything can be directed by Denis Villeneuve, but fantasy epic superhero or sci-fi stuff can have good ideas in it. Democracy and freedom versus authoritarianism, ethical choices about time and consequences. But in these girl boss strong female character projects over the last couple of years, the stories have no ideas. There's nothing to think about. Your head could be as empty as a soap bubble while you're watching. There's tons of stuff literally happening on screen. Look at all that stunt work with people flinging themselves around, and all those CGI explosions, and all those choreographed fight sequences with obliging stuntmen. But there's nothing happening in any sense of ideas. It's just stuff with strong female characters. It's empowered ladies in content. You can become so desensitized you don't even register the side effects of your prescribed serotonin reuptake inhibitors, such as confusion, agitation, muscle twitching, sweating, shivering, diarrhea. Who, what, when, where, why. To show how two-dimensionally, principle-driven these female chick ladies are at the expense of themes and ideas, try reducing them to the basics of who, what, when, where, and why. Who is Galadriel? An ancient, all-wise, youthfully beautiful princess warrior leader and strong female character. What is Galadriel? A strong female character. When is Galadriel? Throughout time and ever present as a strong female character. Where is Galadriel? Everywhere as the driver and decider and rescuer and planner of events as a strong female character. Why is Galadriel? Because she's a strong female character. Don't try and shape your audience. My nephew and niece are ungrateful twerps who get on my nerves. I was extra nice to them and took them to see the new Willy Wonka live experience, and all they did was complain about how dull it was. Anyway, one of the kids, the boy, got given something cool by his parents, something he'd been really keen on for ages, and was gratified because it really expressed his interests. But then his little sister started getting really stroppy and sulking and whining and pestering their parents to also be able to share and use the thing. She'd never expressed any particular interest in it before, but just the sheer fact of her brother having something and some vague sense of being excluded made her insufferable. And so the older brother had to share, and even then, the little sister didn't really have that much sincere interest. My point is, I don't really like my niece and nephew. My other point is that just because a genre of entertainment doesn't feature a certain kind of representation, doesn't have to mean that it therefore suffers from a lack of representation. If there haven't been that many girl-boss strong female characters in superhero or fantasy stuff, it doesn't mean there's any repression or denial. It might just mean that the genres are inherently boy brands. The comic book source material, overwhelmingly read by guys. The Lord of the Rings, generally read and extolled by guys during their formative years. Star Wars being a boyish power fantasy escapist brand, which George Lucas even once said was written for 11-year-old boys. Peter Parker being the quintessential, sensitive, full of energy, adolescent male, with a key Spider-Man story beginning with the words, "This, like any story worth telling, is all about a girl." So when Marvel and the Amazonians and whoever else think they're being assertive and altering the paradigm and creating new opportunities and genres they allege chicks are discouraged to portray, and masses of ladies are theoretically eager to see on screen, it doesn't come across as empowered at all. It's more like a younger sister who climbs up to her brother's treehouse, where he and his buddies hang out, and ignores the keep out sign nailed to the door and butts her way in when they're not there, only to discover maybe the whole thing isn't actually that interesting, and there's really just some bad boy smells from sleeping bags, some wrinkly, tatty pages from porn mags, old comics, a Gatorade bottle, and empty Dorito bags. My point is, a lot of these strong female characters are there out of some ill-judged and sanctimonious principle, not creative urge or love of material. If you're in the hyper-competitive, market-driven world of entertainment, and your key impetus is the principle of the matter, then your characters will be boring. If your corporate strategy is to take intrinsic boy brands and try to expand your ticket and toy sales by making it also a girl brand, then you'll likely end up alienating your established base of nerdy boys, and fail to attract many chicks who are lukewarm about fistfights, laser swords, force chokes, orcs, scrolls, and infinity stones. I'm preoccupied all the time with infinity stones. Constant dehydration and stress means I developed kidney stones that have been around forever. The doctor says I should have a tube stuck down my Johnson so they can try to look for the stones and maybe help them pass. But the last time I let a doctor examine my junk, he started retching because the smell was too vinegary and stale on account of me not having changed my drawers since forever, despite having to endure the itching and the rashes. That was my infinity saga. Alpha males and alpha females. Women writers in Hollywood don't like alpha males. They are the category of human beings they are least likely to be positive and admiring about. That's why a legacy character like Captain James T. Kirk is routinely excluded from retrospective posters of Star Trek, because he was an alpha dog who did the hunka-chunka with a bunch of intergalactic hotties. And James Bond, who last time we saw him, was a sulky guy mooching about on an island with a teddy bear waiting to die. So we know what an on-screen alpha male is, but what is a fantasy alpha female supposed to be? An alpha anything is able to get what they want by being charming in a coercive, sometimes domineering kind of way, or they have a charismatic, assured presence. With our alpha male protagonists, alpha male characteristics are the means by which they rise to become powerful and influential. Hollywood's strong female characters cut out the whole intrinsically compelling, charismatic, interesting, or charming bit, and just become strong female characters. They don't go through a journey, they go through a process, and that's why they're boring. What is the female gaze when gazing at females? We know how men like to look at women on screen, what the supposedly reductivist male gaze is in cinema, an apprehension and focus on women in ways that linger on their allure, their profiles, sometimes in an objectifying way, but other times dwelling on their equanimity, their grace. We like them to be ethereal, like that chick who goes bathing in the public fountain in La Dolce Vita, or whenever Lauren Bacall gave that look that seemed to say, "Come hither, but keep your distance." Nowadays, Hollywood isn't really interested in that kind of thing, except for Christopher Nolan getting out Florence Pugh's Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I don't really know much about intercourse anymore, ever since I got to middle age and my libido petered out, and taking antidepressants and Viagra at the same time made my Johnson go haywire, like one of those inflatable balloon figures that lurch up and down and sway all over the place outside car dealerships. But now that women have carte blanche to showcase women on screen in big popcorn fantasy action superhero stuff, what is their ideal of a female gaze on other women? They don't seem to know. Nobody seems to know. They can't be objectified, but their contours can be shown off, but not with any display of skin, so there are neck-to-ankle costumes which make the female form look like unarticulated mounds, like window mannequins. Are female viewers getting much out of this? Is it a contextualization of womanly-ishness through a female gaze that resonates or appeals or gets to the heart of feminism-itishness? I'd like to get answers to these questions by asking some real-life women. I could ask the Filipino woman who handled my website upgrade inquiry over the phone the other day, but I don't remember her name. And I'm beginning to suspect that the woman I've been talking to over the internet via chatbot isn't actually real. Why are you making chicks like the dudes you don't like? Why are your lady chick characters brimming with the stoic male characteristics you're always disparaging? After a decade or two of trying to deconstruct differences in gender, because such differences, according to progressive theorists, are socially constructed and therefore uphold hierarchies in society that hold women back, there is a drive in Hollywood to create female characters replicating or outdoing the masculine characteristics they've been trying to expose as just gender constructs: stoicism, emotional inaccessibility, staunchness, and patronizing social dominance. So, if these are socially constructed male characteristics that need to be broken down, which you allege inhibit young men from realizing their more sensitive and less identifiably gendered selves, then why are you creating female characters and charging them up to 11 with those very masculine characteristics you spent decades rolling your eyes at? Here's the strange paradox. If Galadriel from The Rings of Power were a male character, female writers and critics would almost certainly deride him as an emotionally shut-off, obnoxious, time-warp macho character, who was, in fact, almost a parody of dated traditional masculinity. But as a female protagonist with these characteristics, she's a progressive, empowered character. As well as this, most of these strong female characters are kind of sexless, and certainly don't have relationships, as if relationships are compromising to their independence and strength. Weirder still, this isn't what female audiences react to. The Marvels flopped. Barely 37% of Rings of Power viewers finished watching the season. Echo was a train wreck. Madam Web was a disaster. Yet, when a strong female superhero character like Wonder Woman also has some sensual and sensitive vulnerabilities and is open to exploration of those feelings and fully fledged romance, it crushes at the box office. Women like relationship stuff. There is a thing called the Beal Test, a half-sarcastic, half-serious set of criteria about how women ought to be portrayed on screen. The criteria of the Beal Test are 1. That at least 2 women are featured, 2. That these women talk to each other, and 3. That they discuss something other than a man. This sounds okay in theory if you're a retarded, cat-owning, chip-on-the-shoulder, scissor-sister, flaky Californian scriptwriter with blue hair and a chubby rear end who's neurotic and prickly and has a metal piercing in her cooch. But it just doesn't reflect reality. If you've been on a train or a subway, or like me, you take the bus because they took away your license because you failed the eye exam on account of having too many cataracts, then when you overhear conversations between 2 ladies, especially young ladies, the conversation frequently drifts towards discussing dudes they're dating. Ex-dudes. Exes who are prospectively redeemable as boyfriends again. The frustratingly inept or unfaithful dudes. The dude who isn't right for their mutual friend. Their bestie's lack of self-esteem, which means they get stuck in cycles of unhappiness with dudes. And on, until you get so overwhelmed with nauseous boredom, you either stick on headphones and play Genesis on your CD Walkman at full blast, or you get off a few stops early and walk the rest of the way to the pharmacy to pick up your antidepressants and painkiller medication. Ladies like relationship material. It's consistently rated among their most popular genres on the TV, and it's partly to do with biology. You see, the ladies have it harder than the guys. They're under enormous pressure with a difficult timeline to establish themselves in a career, discover and nurture their own identity, achieve their goals, and find a decent fella, all in a socio-culturally narrow window, if they want to also prepare to raise a family. Guys can dick around for years, or even decades, because their sperm doesn't go off, and as long as they can manage a semi, they can put a bun in the oven of an obliging lady much later. Therefore, relationships and discussions about men, suitable men, prospective men, loyalties of men, the prospects of men, and the troubling intricacies of relationships are inevitably going to be a preoccupation for women, and a subject of great interest, in terms of romantic dramas, and all that tedious Bridgerton, Notebook, The Lake House, Bridges of Madison County, and endless Hallmark Christmas trash they eat up interminably. The Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and Marvel is intensely cool to some of them, and of passing interest to others. But in terms of demographics and corporate strategy, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Especially if the liquid is a glowing fluorescent goo like you see in Marvel films these days. You can't bend audiences to your will. That's not how storytelling or the market works. Screenwriters don't know what an ideal escapist entertainment female archetype is. No matter what your opinion might be on the matter, most people can describe the broad characteristics of ideal male escapist entertainment archetypes. James Bond's suave demeanor, an implacable confidence with the ladies, facility with cutting-edge technology, his power to decisively and single-handedly influence the fate of society, and his overall aura of independence. Aloft above any domestic malaise, or career malaise, relationship malaise, midlife crisis malaise, or wife nattering in his ear like a flea about his flaws. Then there's Tony Stark, a maverick, popular socialite, entrepreneur, teeming with creative energy and pushing boundaries with tech, who also grows to become more humane, self-aware, less preoccupied with things, and more open to other people. There is also the Bruce Willis type, the staunchly incredulous everyman who finds himself in extraordinary circumstances and improvises and prevails. And of course the Luke Skywalker or Frodo Baggins type, who undergo the hero's journey, as callow and naive youths and grow to accept a destiny larger than themselves. But what is the female ideal escapist entertainment archetype? Writers have had more leeway and scope in the last few years than ever to delve into this idea, and still don't seem to know. They seemed to get partway there with Wonder Woman because she was powerful and morally decent and open to exploring her emotions and appreciating support and the value of teamwork. But then the character abruptly faded because the writers couldn't think of what else to do with her and were hamstrung by the limitations of an Israeli actress with a peachy backside and great hooters, but incredibly limited range of expression. They also produced Black Widow, which was also a success, as a fairly garden variety femme fatale. And while being sophisticated, as well as visual sugar rush-inducing eye candy for the fellas, women didn't turn out in droves, proportionate to the ogling boys. It sure as shit wasn't Timu Indiana Jones, who was so stuffed with girls-can-do-anything goodies that she became a bizarre, overloaded girlboss reactor. More cunning than Indiana Jones, more decisive, with more agency, outshining him in action sequences, is both a scholar of extraordinary knowledge and a notorious beauty pursued by a simp ex-boyfriend, and who ultimately makes the decisive act at the climax of the film. A hyper-concentrated mixture of everything the writers, or Kathleen Kennedy, could envisage to define an ideal escapist entertainment archetype. And audiences, men and women, wanted nothing to do with the film. In the end, the identifiable brand was Indiana Jones, and this Helena Shaw Fleabag lady was just an interloper, not so much a person as a grab bag of silly, unrestrained flights of fancy of the screenwriters. Anywho, if you're a woman, leave a comment below, and that way I can claim to have legitimately interacted with a woman. You could also like, subscribe, and share, which could mean a whole bunch of women are talking about me at once. Which hasn't happened since I went into a feminist bookstore and all the staff gathered around me, asking me what my business was. I told them I just wanted to use the bathroom, and they were none too pleased when my medications caused me to splatter diarrhea all over the bowl in there. I didn't even buy any books.